The doors of the emergency room burst open, and a stretcher rolled in fast, wheels screeching against the tiled floor. A man lay on it, his shirt soaked through, his face pale, his eyes half closed. Two paramedics shouted numbers at the nurses running beside them, blood pressure dropping, pulse weak. Time was already against him. Dr. Maya Bennett was the first to reach the stretcher. She had been on shift for 11 hours, but the moment she saw the man's condition, her tiredness disappeared. She checked his pulse, lifted his eyelid, and called out orders in a calm, steady voice that cut through the noise of the room. "Get me 2 units of blood. Now. Prep operating room 3. He needs surgery immediately." The nurses moved quickly, following her lead without question. Maya had done this hundreds of times before. She knew every second mattered. But before the stretcher could even reach the elevator, a sharp voice stopped everyone in their tracks. "She can't operate." The words rang out across the emergency room, loud enough that even the patients waiting nearby turned their heads. Dr. Daniel Ashford, the chief of surgery, stood at the entrance of the hallway, his arms crossed, his face hard with anger. Maya turned slowly, her hands still pressed against the wound to slow the bleeding. "Dr. Ashford, this man doesn't have time for a discussion. He needs surgery in the next few minutes or he will not survive." "I said she can't operate," Ashford repeated, stepping closer. "I'll assign another surgeon. Dr. Bennett is not authorized for this case." The nurses exchanged confused glances. Nobody understood why the chief would say such a thing in front of everyone, especially when Maya was the most experienced trauma surgeon on shift that night. But there was history between them, a history that none of the younger staff fully understood, and Ashford seemed determined to use this moment to prove a point. Maya did not step back. She kept her hands steady, kept her focus on the dying man in front of her. "With respect, sir, there is no other surgeon in this building right now who can perform this operation faster than I can. Every second we waste arguing is a second closer to losing him." Ashford's jaw tightened. He glanced at the man on the stretcher, then back at Maya. For a moment, it looked like he might physically try to stop her from moving forward. The tension in the hallway was thick enough to feel. Then something happened that no one expected. The injured man on the stretcher, barely conscious, his breathing shallow, turned his head slightly. His eyes opened just a crack, unfocused at first, drifting across the bright lights above him. Then his gaze landed on Maya's face. His lips moved. No sound came out at first. He tried again, forcing air through his damaged chest. "Maya." The single word was barely more than a whisper, but it was enough. The entire hallway went silent. Nurses froze. Even Ashford's expression shifted from anger to confusion. Maya's eyes widened. She leaned down closer to the man's face, staring at him, as if trying to place his features through the blood and bruises. There was something familiar in his eyes, something buried deep in her memory, that was suddenly rising to the surface. "Do I know you?" she whispered, though even as she said it, a strange feeling settled in her chest, a feeling she couldn't yet explain. The man tried to speak again, but his strength gave out. His eyes rolled back and his body went limp against the stretcher. The heart monitor beside him let out a sharp, urgent beep. "He's crashing," one of the nurses shouted. Maya snapped back into focus immediately. Whatever confusion she felt had to wait. Right now, there was only one priority: keeping this man alive. "Move, now," she ordered, pushing the stretcher forward herself. The nurses fell in line behind her, rushing toward the operating room. Ashford stood in the hallway, momentarily frozen by what he had just witnessed. The man had recognized Maya. He had said her name, and whatever secret history existed between them, it was clear this was no ordinary patient. He hesitated only a second before following after them, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. "Bennett, wait." But Maya was already gone, disappearing through the doors of the operating room, her mind racing through everything she needed to prepare. Blood loss, internal damage, a weakening heartbeat, and now, a stranger who somehow knew her name, a man whose face was tugging at a memory she could not quite reach. Inside the operating room, the surgical team scrambled into position. Lights were adjusted, instruments were laid out. Maya scrubbed in as fast as she could, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear of the surgery itself, but from the unanswered questions circling in her mind. Who was this man? And why did his voice, weak and broken as it was, feel like it belonged to someone from her past. The doors of the operating room swung open behind her. Ashford stood in the doorway, his face unreadable now, watching as Maya took her position beside the operating table. "Dr. Bennett," he said, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "Do you know this patient?" Maya looked down at the man's face one more time before pulling on her surgical mask. Beneath the blood, beneath the pain twisting his features, there was something achingly familiar about his jawline, the shape of his eyes, the small scar above his eyebrow. And then it hit her, a memory long buried, resurfacing all at once, like a wave crashing against the shore. "Get me the monitor readings," she said instead, her voice steady, despite the storm building inside her. "We start now." The heart monitor beeped steadily, then faltered, then steadied again. Every second counted. Whatever this man's connection to her past might be, it would have to wait until his life was no longer hanging by a thread. Maya picked up the scalpel, took a deep breath, and looked one last time at the face of a man she was only beginning to remember. The operation had to begin, and somewhere beneath the surface of her calm, focused expression, a storm of memories was waiting to break free. 7 years earlier, in a dusty outpost far from home, Maya Bennett had not yet worn a white coat or walked hospital hallways. Back then, she wore a uniform, dust clinging to her boots, a medical bag strapped across her shoulder, and the sound of distant engines was as familiar to her as birdsong. She had served as a combat medic, deployed with a small unit tasked with protecting a supply route through dangerous territory. It was hard work, exhausting work, the kind that aged a person faster than years ever could. One afternoon, the radio crackled with an urgent call. A patrol group had run into trouble a few miles out. Maya grabbed her bag and climbed into the transport vehicle without hesitation, her heart already pounding with the familiar rush of adrenaline that came before every emergency. When they arrived at the scene, chaos greeted them. Smoke rose from a damaged vehicle. Soldiers moved quickly, some providing cover, others already working to stabilize the wounded. Maya jumped out and ran toward the group, scanning the area for anyone who needed immediate help. That was when she saw him. A young soldier, barely into his 20s, lying against a broken wall, blood soaking through his uniform. His name tag read Cole. He was struggling to breathe, his face pale, panic flashing in his eyes as he realized how serious his condition was. "Stay with me," Maya said, kneeling beside him, her hands already moving to assess the damage. "Look at me. Focus on my voice." The young soldier's eyes locked onto hers, wide with fear but trying desperately to remain calm. "Am I going to die?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Not today," Maya answered firmly. "Not while I'm here." She worked quickly, applying pressure, stabilizing his breathing, calling out instructions to the others around her. The situation was dangerous, every second stretching thin as gunfire continued somewhere in the distance. But Maya blocked out everything except the man in front of her. His life depended on her steady hands and her ability to remain calm under pressure. It took nearly 20 minutes to stabilize him enough for transport, 20 minutes that felt like hours. When the medical helicopter finally arrived, Maya helped load him onto the stretcher, her hands stained but her focus unbroken. Before he was lifted away, the young soldier reached out weakly and grabbed her wrist. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the helicopter blades. "I won't forget this. I won't forget you." Maya offered him a small, tired smile. "Get better, soldier. That's all the thanks I need." She never expected to see him again. Deployments ended. People moved on. Names and faces blurred together over the years, buried beneath countless other emergencies. Other lives saved and lost. She had assumed that chapter of her life was closed, filed away alongside so many other memories of that difficult time. But now, 7 years later, standing over an operating table with her hands inside the chest of a man fighting for his life, Maya finally understood why his face had felt so familiar. The young soldier she had saved in the middle of a war zone had grown into the man now lying before her. Older, changed by years of experience, but unmistakably the same person. Agent Ethan Cole, FBI. The realization hit her like a wave, but she forced herself to stay focused. The operating room demanded her full attention, and there was no room for distraction, not even for a memory this powerful. "Blood pressure dropping," one of the nurses announced, her voice tense. "I see it," Maya replied, her hands moving with practiced precision. Prepare another unit. We need to control this bleeding before we go any further. The surgical team worked in perfect coordination, each person aware of the gravity of the situation. Behind the glass observation window, Chief Ashford stood watching, his earlier anger replaced by something closer to uncertainty. He had tried to stop this surgery, convinced that Maya was not the right choice. But watching her work now, watching the confidence and skill in every movement, he began to question his own judgment. Beside him stood one of the hospital board members, Sophia Whitmore, who had been called in after word spread about the unusual scene in the emergency room. She watched the operation with sharp, observant eyes, occasionally glancing at Ashford with a look of quiet suspicion. You tried to remove her from this case, Sophia said, not looking away from the glass. Why? Ashford hesitated before answering. Dr. Bennett has a complicated history in this hospital. I had my reasons. Your reasons nearly cost that man his life, Sophia replied coolly. I want a full explanation after this surgery is complete. Ashford said nothing, his eyes fixed on the operating table below, where Maya continued working with unwavering focus. He knew this conversation was far from over, and deep down, he understood that the truth he had been hiding for years might finally be catching up to him. Inside the operating room, Maya's hands moved steadily, but her mind kept flashing back to that desert afternoon so many years ago. The young man she had saved then was now under her care again, his life once more depending entirely on her skill and determination. Internal bleeding confirmed near the lower chest, she announced, her voice calm despite the pressure building around her. We need to move fast. The team responded immediately, adjusting instruments, monitoring vital signs, following her lead without hesitation. Whatever doubts Ashford had tried to plant earlier had completely vanished from the room. Everyone present could see clearly that Maya was exactly where she needed to be. As she worked, careful and precise, Maya found herself speaking softly, almost as if Ethan could hear her, even through the haze of anesthesia. You made it out once before, she murmured. You're going to make it out again. The heart monitor beeped steadily, a small but powerful reassurance that his body was still fighting. Maya pressed forward, her focus absolute, her hands guided by both skill and an unexpected wave of personal determination. This was no longer just another patient. This was someone whose life she had already saved once, someone who had somehow found his way back into her operating room after all these years. Outside, in the observation area, Sophia Whitmore continued watching closely, taking mental notes of everything she witnessed. The tension between Ashford and Maya was clearly about more than just hospital protocol. There was history here, deep and complicated, and Sophia intended to uncover exactly what it was. Meanwhile, word of the incident had begun spreading through the hospital. Nurses whispered about the moment the injured agent had spoken Maya's name. Staff members exchanged theories, wondering what connection could possibly exist between a trauma surgeon and an FBI agent who had arrived bleeding and unconscious. None of them knew the full story yet. None of them understood that years before this night, in a place far from the safety of hospital walls, Maya Bennett had already fought to save this same man's life once. And now, fate had brought them back together, under circumstances just as dangerous, just as uncertain. Back inside the operating room, the surgery continued, each minute stretching with unbearable tension. Maya's hands never wavered, her focus never broke, even as the memories of that desert rescue continued flickering at the edges of her mind. She had made a promise to herself long ago, a promise to never give up on a patient, no matter how difficult the circumstances. Tonight, that promise was being tested more than ever before. Vitals stabilizing, the anesthesiologist announced after several tense minutes. He's holding steady. A quiet wave of relief passed through the room, though Maya knew better than to relax completely. The surgery was far from over, and there were still critical moments ahead. But for now, Ethan Cole was still fighting, still holding on, just as he had all those years ago in the middle of a war zone. Maya glanced briefly toward the observation window, where she could see Ashford's tense expression watching from above. Whatever conflict existed between them would have to wait. Right now, her only priority was the man on the table in front of her, a man whose life had once again become tied to her own, through circumstances neither of them could have predicted. As the surgery pressed forward, one truth became increasingly clear to everyone present. This night would change everything, Not just for Ethan Cole, but for Maya Bennett as well. The past and present had collided in the most unexpected way, and there was no telling what consequences would follow once the truth fully came to light. An hour into the surgery, the room had settled into a rhythm of careful, controlled effort. Machines beeped steadily, instruments moved with practiced precision, and Maya's voice remained calm as she guided her team through each delicate step. The bleeding near Ethan's chest had slowed, but there was still significant work ahead. A damaged blood vessel needed careful repair, and any small mistake could undo all the progress they had made. Outside the operating room, tension continued building in a different way. Chief Ashford paced the hallway outside the observation area, his mind racing through possibilities he did not want to face. Sophia Whitmore stood nearby, arms crossed, watching him with the patience of someone who already suspected there was more to this story than he was willing to admit. "You knew this would happen," Sophia finally said, breaking the silence. "The moment you saw that patient come in, you tried to keep Dr. Bennett away from him. That wasn't about hospital protocol. That was personal." Ashford stopped pacing, his shoulders tense. "You don't understand the history here." "Then explain it to me," Sophia replied evenly. "Because right now, all I see is a chief of surgery who tried to prevent the most qualified doctor in this building from saving a man's life. That is a serious concern, Dr. Ashford, and the board will want answers." Ashford exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. For a long moment, he said nothing, staring through the glass at the surgery still in progress. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than before. 3 years ago, there was an incident in this hospital. A patient died during a procedure that I was overseeing. The official report blamed equipment failure, but the truth was more complicated than that. Dr. Bennett was part of the surgical team that night. She saw things that contradicted the official story. Sophia's expression sharpened. "What kind of things?" "She saw me make a decision under pressure that led to a critical delay," Ashford admitted, his voice heavy with old guilt. "She never reported it. She could have ended my career that night, but she stayed quiet, out of respect for the family, out of respect for the hospital's reputation. I always wondered if that silence would eventually run out. So you tried to sideline her career, instead of trusting that she would continue keeping your secret," Sophia said, disbelief clear in her voice. "You punished her for showing you mercy." Ashford did not answer immediately. The truth of Sophia's words settled over him like a weight he could no longer avoid. For years, he had told himself that keeping Maya away from high-profile cases was about maintaining hospital standards, about protecting the institution's reputation. But standing here now, forced to confront his own actions, he understood how deeply flawed that reasoning had always been. "I was afraid," he finally admitted, "afraid that one day she would change her mind, afraid that keeping her close to important cases would eventually lead to questions I wasn't ready to answer." Sophia shook her head slowly. "Tonight, your fear nearly cost a federal agent his life. Do you understand how serious that is?" Before Ashford could respond, a nurse rushed out of the operating room, her expression tense but hopeful. "Dr. Bennett wants an update sent to the board. The patient is stable for now, but she needs approval to bring in additional specialists for post-surgical care." Sophia nodded immediately. "Approved. Tell Dr. Bennett she has full authority to make whatever decisions are necessary for this patient's recovery." The nurse hurried back into the operating room, leaving Ashford standing alone with the weight of his choices pressing down on him. Sophia turned to face him directly, her expression firm. "I want a full written statement from you by morning," she said. "Everything about that incident 3 years ago, everything about tonight. The board will conduct a formal review." Ashford nodded slowly, understanding that there was no way to avoid what was coming. Whatever authority he once held in this hospital was now slipping away, replaced by the consequences of decisions he had spent years trying to bury. Inside the operating room, Maya remained completely focused, unaware of the conversation unfolding just beyond the glass. Her hands worked steadily, repairing the damaged vessel with careful, precise movements. Sweat lined her forehead, but her concentration never wavered. "How is he holding up?" she asked the anesthesiologist without looking away from her work. "Vitals are steady," came the reply. "He's fighting hard." Maya allowed herself a small breath of relief, though she knew there was still more work ahead. As she continued, her mind drifted briefly back to the desert, to that same fighting spirit she had witnessed in a young soldier years ago. It seemed some things about a person never truly changed, not even after all this time. The surgery pressed forward for another hour, each step carefully executed, each decision made with practiced confidence. Slowly, the danger began to ease. The bleeding was fully controlled. The damaged tissue was repaired. Ethan's vital signs grew steadier with each passing minute. Finally, after nearly 4 hours of intense focus, Maya stepped back from the table, allowing herself a brief moment to exhale. "Close him up," she instructed her team. "Great work, everyone." The room filled with quiet relief as the surgical team began the final steps of the procedure. Maya pulled off her gloves, her hands finally steady after hours of intense concentration. She glanced toward the observation window, where she could see Sophia Whitmore watching with an expression of quiet approval, though Ashford was nowhere in sight. Stepping out of the operating room a short while later, Maya was met by Sophia in the hallway. The two women had crossed paths before, though never under circumstances quite like this. "That was remarkable work, Dr. Bennett," Sophia said sincerely. "The hospital owes you a great deal of gratitude tonight." Maya offered a tired but genuine smile. "I was just doing my job. There's more happening here than just tonight's surgery," Sophia continued carefully. "I think it's time we discuss some changes within this department. Changes that are long overdue." Maya's expression grew curious, though exhaustion was beginning to settle heavily over her after the demanding hours she had just endured. "What kind of changes?" Sophia offered a small, knowing smile. "We'll discuss the details soon. For now, get some rest. You've earned it." As Sophia walked away, Maya remained standing in the quiet hallway, her thoughts drifting back to the man now resting in recovery, the same young soldier she had once saved in a war zone, now saved again, years later, under entirely different circumstances. Whatever changes were coming for her career, none of that mattered as much right now as the fact that Ethan Cole was alive. She made her way toward the recovery area, eager to check on her patient one final time before finally allowing herself to rest. The hallway was quiet, the chaos of the night finally beginning to settle. But as she walked, Maya could not shake the feeling that this night marked only the beginning of something much bigger, something that would change far more than just one patient's fate. Meanwhile, in his office down the hall, Ashford sat alone, staring at a blank piece of paper, preparing to write the statement Sophia had demanded. Years of carefully guarded secrets were finally catching up to him, and there was no more running from the truth. Tonight had changed everything, not just for Maya and Ethan, but for him as well. The hospital was quiet now, the emergency of the night finally giving way to calm. But beneath that calm, the consequences of tonight's events were only just beginning to unfold, setting the stage for changes that would reshape careers, relationships, and lives in ways none of them could yet fully understand. 2 days after the surgery, Ethan Cole slowly opened his eyes to the soft hum of hospital machines and the pale light filtering through the blinds. His body felt heavy, every movement requiring more effort than he expected. But he was alive, and slowly, the memories of what happened before he lost consciousness began drifting back to him. A nurse noticed him stirring and quickly stepped out to inform Maya, who arrived within minutes, still dressed in her white coat from morning rounds. She approached his bedside with a calm, professional expression, though there was a flicker of warmth in her eyes that betrayed how personally invested she had become in his recovery. "Welcome back," she said gently. "You gave us quite a scare." Ethan blinked slowly, his voice hoarse as he tried to speak. "Maya Bennett, I can't believe it's really you." "You remember," she said softly, adjusting the monitor beside his bed. "I never forgot," Ethan replied, his voice growing stronger with each word. "You saved my life once before. I always hoped I'd get the chance to thank you properly someday. I just never imagined it would happen like this." Maya smiled, though concern still lingered beneath her calm exterior. "Let's focus on getting you fully recovered first. You've been through a lot." As she checked his vital signs, Ethan studied her face carefully, memories of that dusty afternoon years ago rushing back to him with surprising clarity. He remembered every detail, the sound of her voice telling him to stay calm, the steady confidence in her hands as she worked to save him. It seemed impossible that fate had brought them together again, yet here they were. "What happened to me?" Ethan asked after a moment, his expression growing more serious. "The last thing I remember clearly is being at a location I wasn't supposed to be exposed at. Things happened quickly after that. Maya hesitated slightly before answering. You arrived here with a serious injury near your chest. We're still waiting on more details from your colleagues about exactly what occurred, but you're safe now. That's what matters most. Ethan's expression grew troubled, though he tried to mask it. I need to speak with my partner as soon as possible. There are things happening that this hospital needs to be aware of. Before Maya could respond, the door opened, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, flashing identification toward the nurse standing nearby. His expression was serious, his posture alert, clearly someone accustomed to high-pressure situations. Agent Cole, the man said, stepping closer to the bed. Good to see you awake. Noah, Ethan said, recognition and relief crossing his face. What's the situation? The man, Agent Noah Whitfield, glanced briefly at Maya before answering carefully. The operation you were investigating didn't go unnoticed by the people involved. There's reason to believe they may try to locate you here, especially now that word has spread about your condition. Maya's expression shifted immediately to concern. Are you saying my patient could be in danger inside this hospital? Noah nodded gravely. We're increasing security around this floor as a precaution. I need everyone here to remain alert and avoid discussing details of this case with anyone outside authorized personnel. The weight of this new information settled heavily over the room. Ethan, despite his weakened state, tried to sit up slightly, his instincts as an agent kicking in even through his physical exhaustion. I need to be involved in whatever plan you're putting together, he said firmly. This case is too important to leave in anyone else's hands. You need to focus on recovering, Maya interjected quickly, gently pressing him back against the pillows. You just underwent major surgery. Pushing yourself now could seriously jeopardize everything we work to fix. Ethan looked at her, a mixture of frustration and gratitude crossing his face. You saved my life twice now. I trust your judgment completely, but I also can't ignore the responsibility I have toward this case. Noah stepped closer, his tone firm but respectful. Dr. Bennett is right. You need time to heal. I'll handle things on my end. Extra security personnel will be stationed near this room, and we'll keep this location confidential as much as possible. Maya nodded appreciatively toward Noah before turning her attention back to Ethan. For now, your only responsibility is getting stronger. Let the professionals outside this room handle the rest. As the conversation settled, tension remained thick in the air, an unspoken awareness that danger might still be lingering somewhere beyond the hospital walls. Maya glanced toward the door, silently acknowledging the seriousness of the situation, though she remained outwardly composed for the sake of her patient. Over the following hours, additional security measures were quietly put into place throughout the hospital. Personnel were stationed at key entry points, and staff members were briefed carefully about the importance of discretion regarding this particular patient. The atmosphere throughout the trauma department grew noticeably tense, though most staff members continued their duties professionally despite the underlying uncertainty. Later that evening, as Maya finished a long shift, she found herself once again standing beside Ethan's bed, checking his progress one final time before heading home. He appeared stronger than before, color slowly returning to his face, though exhaustion still weighed heavily on him. You didn't have to stay this late, Ethan said quietly as she adjusted his chart. I wanted to make sure you were stable before I left, Maya replied honestly. Old habits, I suppose. Ethan studied her for a long moment, something thoughtful crossing his expression. You know, all those years ago, when you told me I wasn't going to die that day, I believed you completely. I don't know why, but something about your voice made me trust you instantly. Maya smiled softly, memories of that difficult day resurfacing once again. I meant every word. I never got the chance to properly thank you back then, Ethan continued. Everything happened so fast, and by the time I recovered enough to search for you, I had no way of tracking you down. I always wondered what happened to the medic who saved my life. Life has a strange way of bringing people back together, Maya replied thoughtfully. I never expected to see you again either, especially not like this. Their conversation was interrupted by the soft chime of Maya's pager, signaling another emergency, requiring her attention elsewhere in the hospital. She glanced down at the message before looking back at Ethan apologetically. I need to go, she said, but I'll be back to check on you first thing tomorrow morning. Ethan nodded, a warm, grateful expression settling over his tired features. Thank you, Maya, for everything." As she walked out of the room, Maya couldn't help but feel a strange sense of connection to Ethan's story, a connection that went beyond typical doctor and patient relationships. Their paths had crossed under the most unlikely circumstances, not once, but twice, each time during moments of extreme danger and uncertainty. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, Agent Noah Whitfield worked quickly alongside additional security teams, coordinating efforts to ensure that whatever threat existed toward Ethan remained contained. Reports continued coming in about the investigation Ethan had been involved in before his injury, an investigation that clearly touched on something far more serious than anyone initially realized. As the night deepened, tension continued lingering throughout the hospital, an undercurrent of uncertainty beneath the otherwise calm and orderly halls. Yet despite the danger still looming somewhere beyond those walls, one thing remained clear: Ethan Cole was alive, recovering steadily, largely thanks to the same skilled hands that had once saved him years earlier in a place far from home. The following morning brought a renewed sense of determination throughout the hospital staff. Security remained tight, but there were no signs of any immediate threat materializing. Maya arrived early for her shift, eager to check on Ethan's progress, carrying with her a quiet hope that perhaps the most difficult chapter of this unexpected reunion was finally behind them. Little did she know, the true resolution of this story, both for Ethan's safety and for the long-buried secrets within her own hospital, was only just beginning to unfold. A week passed, and Ethan's recovery continued steadily, under Maya's careful supervision. Each day brought small improvements, his strength gradually returning, his color healthier, his spirit noticeably lifted by the constant support surrounding him. The security concerns that had once loomed so heavily over the hospital had quietly resolved themselves after federal agents successfully addressed the situation Ethan had been investigating before his injury. The danger, it seemed, had finally passed. During this time, the hospital board completed its review into the events surrounding that fateful night. Sophia Whitmore led the investigation personally, gathering statements from staff members, reviewing hospital records, and speaking privately with both Maya and Chief Ashford on multiple occasions. The findings were significant. Ashford's written statement confirmed everything Sophia had suspected, revealing not only the truth behind the incident 3 years earlier, but also a pattern of behavior that had unfairly limited Maya's career opportunities within the hospital. The report detailed how Ashford had repeatedly assigned her to lower-profile cases, blocked her recommendations for advancement, and created an environment where her considerable talent had gone consistently unrecognized. When the board's findings were finally presented in a formal meeting, the decision was unanimous. Chief Ashford was removed from his leadership position, effective immediately, with the option to remain on staff in a reduced role should he choose to accept it. Given the weight of his actions, most expected he would eventually resign entirely. Maya, meanwhile, was called into a private meeting with Sophia and several other board members. She entered the room, uncertain of what to expect, still recovering from the emotional weight of the past week's events. "Dr. Bennett," Sophia began, her tone warm but professional, "the board has reviewed your record extensively over the past week, alongside the testimony from that unforgettable night. Your skill, composure, and dedication to your patients have been nothing short of exceptional." Maya remained quiet, waiting to understand where this conversation was heading. "We would like to offer you the position of head of trauma surgery," Sophia continued, "effective immediately. This hospital needs leadership that reflects the same values you've demonstrated throughout your career, values that were unfortunately overlooked for far too long." For a moment, Maya sat in stunned silence, the weight of years of overlooked effort finally being acknowledged in a single, powerful moment. "I don't know what to say," she admitted honestly. "Say yes," Sophia replied with a small smile. "This hospital is fortunate to have someone like you. It's time that was properly recognized." Maya accepted the position with quiet gratitude, her mind still processing the whirlwind of events that had unfolded over such a short period of time. What began as a chaotic emergency, filled with tension and uncertainty, had ultimately led to a moment of long overdue recognition and positive change. Later that same day, Maya made her way to Ethan's room, eager to share the news with the man whose unexpected arrival had set these events into motion. She found him sitting upright in bed, looking stronger than she had seen him since his arrival, a genuine smile spreading across his face as she entered. "You look happy," Ethan observed immediately. Something good happened? Maya couldn't help but smile as she shared the news of her promotion. Ethan's face lit up with genuine excitement, clearly proud of the woman who had saved his life not once, but twice, under the most extraordinary circumstances. "That's incredible," he said sincerely. "Honestly, it's about time this hospital recognized what I saw the moment I opened my eyes and found you standing over me. You're exceptional at what you do, Maya. I'm just glad the people here finally see that too." "I couldn't have gotten here without an unusual amount of unexpected help," Maya replied with a soft laugh. Thinking back over everything that had transpired, their conversation continued warmly, filled with the easy comfort of two people who had shared an extraordinary bond across years and unexpected circumstances. Ethan's discharge was scheduled for later that week, his recovery having progressed remarkably well thanks to Maya's careful attention and skill. On the day of his discharge, Ethan stood slowly from his hospital bed, dressed once again in regular clothes for the first time since his arrival. Maya arrived to complete his final examination, her expression carrying a mixture of professional pride and personal warmth. "You're officially cleared to go," she said, reviewing his chart one final time. "Take it easy for the next few weeks, though. Your body has been through a great deal." "I promise to follow doctor's orders," Ethan replied with a playful smile, "though I imagine convincing my superiors to give me some downtime might prove more difficult than convincing you I'm ready to leave." Maya laughed softly, closing his chart. "Something tells me you'll manage just fine." As Ethan prepared to leave, he paused, turning back to face her one final time before stepping out into the hallway. "Maya, I owe you my life twice over now. Words don't seem like enough to express how grateful I am." "You don't owe me anything," Maya replied sincerely. "Seeing you walk out of this hospital healthy and strong, that's more than enough for me." Ethan reached out and gently took her hand. A warm, genuine gratitude reflected clearly in his eyes. "I'd like to stay in touch, if that's something you'd be open to. Not as doctor and patient this time, but simply as two people whose paths keep finding each other in the most unlikely ways." Maya smiled warmly, a quiet sense of peace settling over her after everything they had both endured. "I'd like that very much." As Ethan finally walked out of the hospital that afternoon, stepping into the sunlight with Noah waiting nearby to accompany him home, Maya stood watching from the entrance, reflecting on everything that had unfolded over the past 2 remarkable weeks. What began as a chaotic, tense night in the emergency room had ultimately led to the resolution of long-buried injustices, the recognition of years of overlooked talent, and the unexpected reunion of two people whose lives had been connected by fate long before either of them fully understood why. Later that evening, as Maya walked through the newly quiet hospital hallways, now carrying the title of head of trauma surgery, she paused for a moment, near the emergency room entrance, the same place where this entire extraordinary journey had begun. The chaos of that night, the shouted objections, the desperate race against time, all of it had led to this moment of quiet, well-earned peace. She thought about Ethan, now safely on his way home, carrying with him not just his recovery, but a renewed connection to the woman who had saved his life, across years and circumstances neither of them could have ever predicted. She thought about the difficult journey that had finally led to her own long-overdue recognition within these very halls. As she turned to continue her rounds, a genuine smile settled across her face, the kind of smile that came from knowing that sometimes, even the most difficult and unexpected nights could ultimately lead to the exact outcome someone had been quietly hoping for all along. The hospital continued its steady rhythm around her, patients arriving, emergencies unfolding, life carrying on as it always did within these busy walls. But for Maya Bennett, this particular chapter of her story had finally reached the resolution she deserved, a resolution built on skill, resilience, and the unexpected power of a promise made years ago in the middle of a dangerous, unforgiving landscape, a promise that had ultimately come full circle in the most extraordinary way imaginable.